I don't know if you remember, but I think even the first time you were on this podcast, I was bugging you. I was like, dude, you got to make more shit like this. I don't know.
And then he makes a whole album of it.
Well, right. But like, it took you a few years. I mean, this is kind of like an intense way to just jump into it, I guess. But like, obviously you're from the UK, man, but I feel like we never really talked about like, what's your relationship to garage and to two-step and like those sounds? Like, was that a part of your childhood at all?
Yeah, I think it was, because it was always on the radio. Like that was what I guess pop music was back then, was like Craig David and like shit like that.
Yeah.
So I think at the time I wasn't necessarily like realizing it, but then I look back and I kind of reflect on all of that stuff that I grew up around. I'm like, wow, like I did this thing where it was like, you can find out the song that was number one when you were born.
Oh yeah.
And I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like a garage song. Like that's all the UK was like popular for and played as pop music. So yeah, I think it just inadvertently inspired me without me even realizing it. And it took like 24 years to realize it.
Well, was it the kind of thing, because I assume you weren't like listening to pop music heavy as a kid, like other than, what's on the radio or that kind of thing. Was it that kind of reaction of like, when you're a kid, you're like, pop music, fuck that, it's corny. But then you sort of realize later that it's kind of like seeped into your consciousness a bit.
Yeah, it was mostly just like fucking, pardon me. It was mostly just like, being in the car with my mom and not even realizing it. And then like I said, just over time, just hearing more of it. And I was like, okay, I can tolerate this. I'm saying I can tolerate it. I was like 10 years old.
Yeah.
But like growing up, you slowly start appreciating it rather than just like what's on the radio. So I definitely think that's where it came from, because there was no real other time that I was like exposed to it on the magnitude that I was listening to like UK radio when I was like growing up.
Well, and I think people forget, or maybe people in the US don't even really know, like when we talk about garage and two-step being pop music in the UK, like it was really pop for a few years there. Like that was the hit sound. Like, I don't know, the equivalent in the US would be like, if like, I guess like Drake or somebody made a two-step or a garage song, right? Like it was on that level.
Yes, it's just hella weird because you don't even realize it's happening to you. And what's really weird to me as well is I think about what is happening to me right now that I'm not realizing that I'm going to realize in like 15 years time, and then look back and go, whoa, like
that's interesting.
Humans are weird, bro. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they are, man. I mean, what can you be specific about that? Like when you say that now, what's happening to you? Do you mean like musically what you're absorbing, or just more in a life sense? Just
everything. Like, another thought. I mean, this is like the third one of these that we've done now, and we always get really deep. But another thought that I had was like, you can't remember your childhood, right? Or you can remember key like pivotal moments or whatever of your childhood. But what am I going to remember of this in 20 years time?
Yeah.
I don't, it just freaks me the fuck out.
Yeah, no, it's super weird, man. I know exactly what you mean. So two things off of that. I mean, like you said, man, you've been here plenty of times. We can get weird right away. And two things off of what you just said. I mean, you were talking about, childhood memories and all that. And like, especially super early childhood memories. I think for most people you can't remember a lot of like your really, really early childhood, the first few years. But then they say that's, developmentally, that's like the most affecting times in your life, like sort of what determines what kind of person you're going to be. So first of all, that's just a complete mindfuck, right? It's like the most important part of your life you can't remember. Everybody? Like, how weird is that?
I don't like this, Willie. I don't like this.
Well, okay, let me bring it to the present then, because you were saying like what parts of our lives now, that like what's happening to us right now, what are we going to remember? For me, I'm curious about you because I think about this a lot. For me, it's very random. I have like certain moments and memories that are crystal clear in my mind that I can pull into my head instantaneously, but they're not always the important ones. They're not always the significant ones. What about you? I mean, do you have, and maybe, you know, for the the benefit of the listeners, let's maybe talk about like musical memories or memories in your career, maybe whether it's the studio or on tour, working with somebody, whatever. Do you have any of those that just run in the background of your head a lot and you don't necessarily know why?
I'm gonna have to start. You're gonna have to invoice me for a therapy session. You know, I don't know. I think, you know, I think back to like key moments where I feel like I had a big accomplishment per se, but at the same time, it just kind of all blurs into one, and I think that's the thing that makes, you know, what I was saying earlier even scarier, is because you're constantly told, like, as you grow up, you know, your brain is developing, right? Blah 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 blah, and that you'll start remembering things more clearly. But even from like a few years ago, I like musically, let's keep it on music, right. But like musically, I don't even remember, and it feels like that was like a million years ago. So I don't know, like. I don't know. I've just been like really trying to like live in the moment, as fucking cliche and cheesy as that sounds.
Nah, dude, it's true though. That's one of those cliches that's actually true.
True. Yeah.
Like the older I get, man, the more I realize like that's almost, you know, maybe it's too far to say that's the secret to life, but it really, you know, it's like at the end of the day, that's all we really have. Like we're sitting here talking about, well, because we're sitting here talking about like, oh, these memories, we don't know how it works. Why can I remember certain things? Why can't I remember other things? The only thing we can be sure of is what's happening in the moment, right? Like, yeah, I don't know, man, we got super deep. This was not what I was expecting 5 minutes ago.
The future doesn't even exist.
No, sir.
All these things we've planned, and it's like, will it even like, I think of the future as like a tangible line of events, but when you think of it realistically in the sense of like now, none of it exists.
Right. Yeah.
I don't.
Well, no. Okay. So let's play this out though, because there's certain things in the future I'm pretty sure are going to happen.
Yeah.
Like your album coming out, right? Like,
hopefully, yeah.
Someone in the chat just said, if there's no future, how is there future garage?
Damn. That's true. Maybe it should just be present garage.
Present garage. I always thought that was funny. You know how there's like future bass? It's like nobody ever talks about.
Why is it called that?
Well, you know, like nobody ever talks about past bass. I'm way more into past bass than future bass.
I think future bass is so played out that it should be called past bass.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
Shit. Someone's going to clip that.
I think even the people who make future bass feel that way at this point, man. Like genre names in general are so... I don't know. People love categorizing stuff, but I feel like, at least to me, I've never understood that tendency that like, every new idea has to have this label put on it.
Yeah, it should be that. I don't know. I said it somewhere recently, and it was like that stuff should just be left for like playlisters and people who work at like Beatport to, you know, like as an artist, you shouldn't have the genre that you're making be in the forefront of your mind when going into making stuff, because then it's just not authentic. You know, and I'm sure you can resonate with this as well. We never go into anything being like, I mean, hey, we might have done it a couple of times, but like 9 times out of 10, you never really go into like making music and you're like, yeah, I want it to be exactly like this. It's
right.
Just so redundant, you know? So I think when fans and like the listeners and the general public kind of get a whiff of that, and they're like, oh yeah, this is so and so, or this is so, like, just, you should just leave it up to the people whose job it is to promote the music rather than who it is to listen to it, because then you're just pigeonholing yourself, you know?
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
yeah.
it's interesting thinking about, like, you know, you talk about the people who are paid, that's their job to promote music. And, you know, and all of us as artists, we need those people. We need a whole team to kind of make the whole project go. How are you with relinquishing that part of control, like over, you know, the marketing of it, the presentation of it? Because I think that's something some people have a really hard time doing. Like, once you get out of the studio, you made your songs, you've got your babies. How are you with letting them go and kind of letting people, you know, interpret it as they will?
I want to think I'm good at it, but I'm actually like fucking terrible. just being candid.
Yeah.
I think, you know, my mind works in such a way where if I see something or I think of something, I need to do it then and there. And, you know, I hand off a record to, like, I don't know, management or a label or whoever it may be. And I need to have, like, input. And that's obviously my downfall in a business sense, because I'm, you know, the long and short of it is I'm essentially employing these people to do it for me.
Right.
You know, that's ultimately what a management label situation is. But yeah, I get so, I almost romanticize the idea of not only finishing a song, but putting it together in like a deliverable sense. I never want to just like finish a song and be like, here you go. And that's kind of it. And again, that's probably my downfall, but I think some really cool moments that, you know, I've created, as well as my team, or, you know, the vendor that we're releasing music through, whether it be Monstercat or someone else. I think in the long run, it comes out to be a cool thing, but definitely during the time of it happening, I can see why it's just a fucking hassle.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just the ebb and flow of it. You know, you gotta put your input in and have your thoughts heard by your team, because ultimately you're working collectively on it. But at the same time, you just got to learn not to overstep. And I am definitely still learning that after 11 years of doing this.
It's always a work in progress, my friend. That's I think
Yep.
all of us are a work in progress in that regard. And I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, yeah, sure, you hire people, you find people on your team who are meant to take care of some of this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's your name on it and your face on it, right?
Yeah.
So there is a certain amount that, and I've learned this lesson over and over recently, for sure, that even like in the switching over the podcast to Twitch and all that, you know, there's all these new ideas and new things flying around. And every once in a while, I think it's important for any creative to kind of just have to sort of take that step forward and be like, what is this about again? Like, what are my core values? What, you know, what do I really want to put out here? You know, it's crazy. I was just realizing pre-pandemic, man, you were like almost literally the last person I saw before lockdown. Because you and I were, do you remember we were out working in that studio in San Diego, and I flew back home like 2 days after that, and that was it. It was lockdown.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That was weird, because I'd seen you, like, I want to say like 3 or 4 weeks beforehand when I did Washington DC.
That's
as well.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. That was such, like, if, you know, if the world has a certain way of doing things, then it fucking hates me, because it was just like, I had done that tour, right? I was bang halfway through, and without getting too deep on the personal stuff, it was like the first shows were great, you know, it was like first headline tour or whatever.
Yeah.
And then kind of after the point of where everything got cancelled, it was like, right, these are the like biggest shows, like we'll be able to, like, you know, financially recoup more and like put more money up front to these smaller shows to make it a success. And we were like shifting like a lot of tickets for like Atlanta and Chicago, and we had like headline LA and everything. And then as that like pivotal I can't even say the fucking word, and I say someone
Pivotal.
Yeah. After that show, I was like, all right, we're on the up and up here, you know, like whatever. Everything got cancelled. We were just sitting in like North Dakota, just Fargo or wherever the fuck it was. And I was like, yeah, there's like a virus that's like taking over the world right now. And I just remember sitting in the hotel and I was like, oh fuck. And then the next day was Chicago and it got cancelled. So yeah, I just remember that speaking of like what we kind of started on, that was one of the moments I remember so vividly of just being like, fuck. Like, fuck. I was so pissed off. Like I came home and I was like, I said to Haley, I was like, yo, this ain't gonna be good. Like, and then after that was when everyone was like freaking out and thinking like martial law was gonna be like enforced, and we drove from like North County to like this random like grocery store in like downtown San Diego, and there was nothing, and we were like, holy fuck, like this is
yeah, people were panic buying everything. Oh man,
it was stupid, man. It was, I mean, hey, people do what they go do, you know. At the end of the day, if you're worried about someone, then you're gonna look out for yourself first. But as someone who had to eat fucking expired pretzel bread because there was no loaves of bread left.
Oh, come on.
A massive fuck you. But, you know.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Man, what have you... Did you start cooking or anything? How's your diet been in quarantine, man?
You know, for the longest time, I really craved top ramen.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously, that was out of stock. Because everyone was just bulk buying like dried foods. I don't know. My diet hasn't really changed. I still eat shit.
Right.
I still have a really fast metabolism. Yeah, I think at the start of it, I definitely because you know we were home so much. I got in a bit of a routine of like actually eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and like waking up at a reasonable time and stuff. But then as things like started opening up and like more restaurants were more accepting and stuff, it just kind of went back to how it was before recently. But at the start, I definitely had like a wake up, have breakfast, feel great, all this kind of shit. And then it just went all downhill.
Well, because that was never you before, right? Was the 3 meals a day kind of thing. Yeah. I kind of just eat. I just eat when I'm hungry because there's no real schedule. As you know, when you're traveling all the time, it's kind of impossible. You just kind of eat when you get the chance to. Right. Well, and you've been a night owl too, right? Like you're the stay up all nighter a lot of times.
Yeah, I mean, recently it was like, I mean, I've done like a few shows here and there, and but I was like going to bed at like midnight, which is like unheard of for me. But like last night, I like started working on this just like bootleg of Ghost Voices by Virtual Self.
Yeah.
I stayed up till like 4 o'clock. It was the first time I like really felt like inspired to like just say fuck you to everything else and just work on music.
I mean, that's fun though, man. I feel like that feeling never stops being fun, you know, when you really are feeling it and you're like, nothing else matters other than that's being in the moment. Like, to take it back to what we were talking about, that's like nothing else is going to be more important or more fun than what I'm doing right now. So just shut everything else out. I mean, that's kind of beautiful, man.
Yeah, in a weird way. I think you free yourself of responsibilities, you know, like everyone's asleep, the dogs are asleep. I don't need to look after the dogs, like all this kind of stuff. Like it's just, yeah. Definitely I think that's one of my favorite moments in what I do is those random bursts of just like, you know, fuck everything else. I'm gonna just, you know, focus on this.
Yeah. How often do you have those kind of moments? How often? Because I think of you as and I've told you this a million times, but I think of you as a very creative person, somebody who's always got some musical idea running in the background of your brain. Like, how often do you just get that burst of inspiration and just, you know, sit down and whip something out kind of without any forethought?
Not a lot recently, because obviously I think the main killer for that kind of mental avenue per se is obviously responsibilities.
Yeah.
And I think, when you're caught up in, looking after a house and looking after animals and, being present in a relationship with your partner, which is something that I've really tried to like hone in on as well during quarantine. It kind of deflects any forethought for going into that almost like self-destructive mentality of just like saying fuck you to everything. But yeah, last night it happened, and then I would say like it happens where I want to do it so frequently to the point of like I could literally just be in here all day and just ignore the world. But realistically, I think like once or twice a week, I really just kind of take up my own brain on its offer, really.
It's offer. That's great.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know, man. I think, the world works in mysterious ways, and if I was alone and I didn't have an ecosystem around me of responsibility, then I would just be doing it all the time. And I think at that point it would get unhealthy because there would be no way for me to draw myself away from it.
Right.
But I like the balance I have now, because I can step away and I can be like, I've already done enough, or I feel like I've accomplished at least something within my career, within, my artistic kind of crazy brain. But then I also feel like I've accomplished something in like doing the dishes or, hoovering the house and things like that. So I think the balance is definitely needed.
Yeah, I think that's great, man. And I think while you're talking, I'm sort of realizing, I think that's how because what you're talking about, saying fuck it to the world and shutting yourself off, like that's also, sometimes it's needed to be creative, but it is sort of by definition, like a selfish act.
Yeah.
And then what you're talking about now is like finding value in non-selfish acts, like whether it's vacuuming the house or taking care of an animal, whatever it may be. I think that's just a good balance, man, because you got to have a little of both.
Yeah. I say this a lot, and I'm, very blessed and thankful to be in the position that I'm in, where I don't really have any other responsibilities outside of like my family and my career, my music career. Never, as never like worked like a normal job. But like, I think learning that myself and going through those times myself and realizing that, I actually need to fucking like put my head down and work on a balance that is actually healthy for my life.
Right.
I think it's actually made me appreciate it a lot more. Again, it's just finding that fine line between like just being a fucking crazed creative and actually being like a present human being as well.
Yeah. And not losing that creative spark at the same time, right? Yeah. Do you look at anyone in our world, any of our peers? Like I was thinking about, this isn't like who are your musical inspirations, but more like do you look at anyone who does what we do as like a life inspiration? Sometimes I look at people who aren't necessarily, maybe they're not the most successful, or maybe it's not just their music that draws me to them, but there's certain people where I'm just like, man, they have it figured out. And there's certain people where I don't necessarily want to make their music, but I do admire their life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, growing older, I've definitely especially admired people with kids.
Yeah.
So, I've always said like, I mean, don't get me wrong. They're all, incredible fucking producers and incredible musicians and stuff like that. But like the fundamentals of what I really aspire to be and what I really looked up to was people like Jake, like Kill the Noise.
Yeah. He's always high on my list too.
Fucking Jose, like et cetera. Lee Must Die. Like,
yeah.
The thing with that is it's like, they've all got like families, they've all got kids, they've all got, lives outside of music. They don't have, as far as I know, they don't have jobs outside of music, but they're able to balance everything perfectly, be a present father figure and but still be successful in music. And what's really funny to me is a lot of these kids, right, who are so into the party lifestyle, and we've talked about this before, and just like almost reckless and just egotistical and rude and, you know, all this kind of stuff, they don't last very long. But people like Lee, Jake, and Jose, all of their careers have been over like 12, 15 years. They have longevity down to a fucking T.
Yep.
And to see them be able to do that while simultaneously raising kids and having a functioning family and just being great people in general, I think that's the most, you know, admirable thing that anyone in this industry can do.
I agree, man. I mean, those three people, that's a great list. And Jake for me is always high up there. Lee, of course, Jose, all of them. I mean, it's interesting, man. When I think about all three of those names too, I think about reinvention too. You were talking about how they've managed to, you know, not only keep it balanced, but have these really long careers. And I think that might be a good way to tie it back to you and to this new album. Not that it's a reinvention of what you do, but it definitely, I think, is a strong step in a new direction, one that maybe you've only kind of hinted at before. And, you know, maybe we talked about some of the childhood influence of garage and two-step and all that early on, but why now for this album? Was it a conscious choice, or did you just kind of notice like a similarity in a lot of stuff you were making there?
I think it's really come from the place of like, you know, when you're constantly touring, you are surrounded by just like loud bass music, and you obviously get influenced by the stuff that people are playing out and people are making, and you get caught up in this almost like vacuum of oh, I've got to make this so so and so plays it out, or it sounds good live, and having that kind of stripped away with you know, the pandemic and things like that, it just allowed me to look more inward to the music that I've kind of always wanted to make but never really had the chance to. I mean, I've made things like in the same vein before, but it's never been like a forefront. It's never been at like the forefront of my mind to actually release them and make like a whole moment around it. So I think it ultimately just comes from being absent from touring and absent from live shows, and just kind of realizing like, sure, I wanted to make the heavy music and I still enjoy making heavy music, but realistically, you know, while I'm stuck at home, there's no shows happening, no one's playing any shows. I don't want to just make heavy music. I want to make stuff that's like more personal to me, you know? And there's a lot of people who will deny that and say that they don't just make music for shows. Cap. Absolute fucking no, but listen, right, no one wants to admit it. But it's absolutely fine to admit it, because that's just the world we live in.
Yeah.
You want to make a song and be like, this will fucking slap live, and that's completely okay. But I think people just, you know, and what I wish people do is just look more inward and just be honest with themselves and just be like, is this really what I want to make? And if it is, fuck yeah, more power to you. But like, someone I look at and who inspires me a lot is a producer named Heckler. And recently he's taken this super like just fucking beautiful melodic direction while retaining some of this like heavy live show feel. Yeah. And I think that's so dope. And I think more people need to just look inward, you know?
Well, sure. And especially, you know, if you do that inward look and you come away saying, no, I actually do want to make this heavy music and all that, I agree with you. That's great. But even with that, to use Heckler as an example, it's like, okay, well, if we're going to do that, we still need the personality in it, right? We still need the perspective. And, you know, I think like he's a good example of a way of showing like, you can advance this form, even if you're sort of doing it for the live. Not that this is why he's doing it, but, you know, if you are doing it for the live show, if you do want to see the crowd jump up and down to it, even in that, there's so many different ways to be creative and to push it forward. And I think you and I probably share the frustration that many people don't do that, because you don't have to necessarily. Like, you can keep a touring career going by just kind of, running the sausage through the machine again.
Yeah, I think if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
But another thing that I've been so adamant on saying about this album as well is it's like, it's not even me changing my sound. It's not even me trying to move directions as an artist or move away from like the heavier music or rewrite myself into more of like a mainstream area. It's more so just like, this is what I was feeling at that moment. And I made it all in quarantine. None of it was like demos from before or anything. Everything was like constructed like straight up during like the pandemic.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt that time. And I'm going to put it out into the world with like some cool visuals around it and stuff that we've been working on. And that's that. And I don't ever want it to be like, oh, Bradley's changing his sound and like going just a fucking 180, because we've seen people do that before and it's not ended up good, like not naming any names, but like it just doesn't, it doesn't go down well as much as I wish it would. But yeah, I think just being true to myself, it's like, that's the music I wanted to make in that moment. I mean, like I said, I started this fucking bootleg last night and it's heavy as fuck, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be like, I'm going to release every song on Never Say Die for the rest of my life. Like everything is always changing. And I think as an artist, you've really got to just adapt with it while still retaining some of your own personality at the same time.
I agree, man. I think what a lot of artists, it's funny because I think a lot of artists feel similar to what you just said, but I think a lot of people will stop themselves. Like, even if they make something different, they'll sit on it or they'll put it out under a different name, or they just, I think a lot of people get held back by the fear, like almost the weight of what they've already put out, Like, did you feel that at all? Do you feel that?
Nah, I think the more diversity, the better. And I think someone asked me that as well. It's like, how are you feeling about releasing music that is different from like what you normally put out? And I kind of just paused. And it wasn't like a podcast or interview or anything formal. Yeah. It was just like on a one-to-one level. I kind of paused. I was like, shut up. Like, just, it's like, I don't know, man. It's the what I've seen at least is the EPs that I've done in the past. I think I've told you this before, but I'll repeat it. The EPs that I've done in the past, the last track on every EP, I try and make like somewhat different, right? And not so bass leaning. I mean, with the Dim Mak EP, it was the Don't Lie record, which was more pop. The Never Say Die EP was like a song called like Gave You Love or something, which was like kind of Jack U kind of inspired kind of vibe. And the funny thing is all of those songs do the best out of those EPs.
That's interesting.
None of like the heavy, I mean, obviously the heavy songs get picked up by like DJs and played live and all this kind of stuff. But in like a streaming, like revenue popularity sense, it's always the kind of left field last songs that I call them that do the best. So I was just like, fuck it. Like, I'll just do a whole album of those kind of songs and see how it goes. And if it flops, then, it's still a real representation of how I was feeling at the time. But if it does good, then, happy days.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And it's funny, your friend or whoever you were talking to asking you, does it feel weird to release something different than what you did in the past? Like, because when you really break that question down, it's almost, the question should be like, does it feel weird to not do that? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, hey man, I'm all for being civil, but it just caught me so off guard because I was like, because I know that there's artists out there, right, who release the same kind of music all the time. And, it's very similar to their past release because they know it works and that's their lane and that's, what they're good at.
Yeah.
And fair enough. Like that's fucking sick. A perfect example of that is like Tramper, right? Every song he puts out is an absolute smash. It's all very similar, but you can tell that it's him.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with that. I just think it's just two different type of producers or artists. I think one is kind of staying in line with, you know, what they know will work and what their fans really love. And the other is kind of just like me, where it's like, I'm just going to do whatever and just say, fuck it.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, with you and with Trampa both, I think both of you guys have such an authenticity to what you do, right? Like with Trampa, it never feels like he's kind of just on the treadmill making something to keep the machine. You know, it's always so weird and interesting. And yeah, even I don't know if you heard his last album. There's some really interesting stuff on there. Like I would not expect from him. Some like deeper jungle stuff.
It's fire. Yeah. So sick. Yeah. So sick.
So dope, man. I mean, this new album, I mean, you were talking about you have ideas for visuals to accompany it. I'm sure you're thinking about, you know, an album tour. I'm sure that's probably already in the works. You know, coming back to live shows, if this is an album made in quarantine when you weren't thinking about live shows at all, how are you going to approach doing live shows differently if you're going to approach doing them differently now, you know?
And this is a question that we've all been like in my camp, like fucking like confused over, is because we don't know.
Right.
And you know, we're in this situation where, you know, as of last year, we actually turned down a lot of things because I was doing a headline tour. But then what happened was the tour didn't get rebooked, but everything from last year is like a rebook. So we have this like kind of grace period of like me not touring right now, to kind of figure out. Personally, I don't want to change anything about the shows. I would ideally want to just like, you know, take some parts of the album and flip them or remix them into like cooler, more energetic sections of the show.
Sure.
But I don't even know if an album tour is going to happen, because like it's not tourable music, and I think that's kind of like the best part about it. Is like I can look at it from, you know, putting my fucking business cap on. I can look at it as essentially two different entities. You know, you got the touring, which is like the obnoxious party music, and just run with that and do that and incorporate some kind of crossover from the album. But then the streaming album side of it lives in its own space, and that's generating like popularity, hopefully, and new fans and people from different climates who wouldn't have heard of me before. And those things are kind of going on simultaneously. So I you know, we've all kind of been thinking like, how the fuck are we going to make it happen?
Yeah.
Personally, I don't think it will. And I am completely okay with that.
That's interesting, man. And again, I like because that's an unexpected answer. I think most people would be like, oh, you know, I made this album that's different than what I'm known for. And, you know, now we have to go full in on this tour and we have to change everything. And I kind of like that you're talking about this just as it's like a record of what happened in the moment, right?
Yeah. I think to take it a conventional route of dating way back in the day of like release an album, tour the album, sit at home, write a new album, release the album, tour the album, just doesn't work for me. I think my mind works too fast to be able to have that be like an attainable goal. And it works for a lot of people. And again, I'm not bashing it, because, you know, it's a great business model. But yeah, for me, I don't know. I think, and I also would just hate to like set up this whole tour and it'd be like, all right, here's the album, and it's like an hour of like Future Garage, and it's just like the kids who know me from like the heavier music aren't into it, and just I don't know, that scares me. That's something that like plays on my vulnerability, is like going out there and being like, all right, this is a true representation of me that I made in a pandemic, check it out, and it just doesn't do well. I think that would be the scariest thing for the touring aspect, at least.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, yeah, maybe there's ways to, and I'm not saying you should do this, but I feel like some people have tried to do interesting things with that. Like I just told this story on the podcast, but I saw like 2 years ago now, I guess, I saw Mr. Carmack open for himself, and he had like a live band that was like a live like funk soul band that played the opening set. And then he was like, okay, give me 5 minutes. And then he like ran up to the DJ booth and did like a full on Mr. Carmack set. It was kind of, yeah, it was kind of sick, man. I feel like, I don't know, maybe there's a way to, I don't know, maybe you can find some, dark after party spot to do the album cuts,
Yeah, I'd love to like play like after hours type, like different set. I think we were trying to set one up in a couple of months somewhere, but yeah, that's I mean, hey, that's a cool angle to do it. I just don't know how receptive like the dubstep crowd would be to it, because I really only play to like the dubstep crowd. For some reason, I'm always build on lineups with dubstep people.
Right.
Don't know how or why, but I'm thankful. Don't get me wrong. I love it, and I'm so appreciative and grateful for it. But yeah, I don't know how that would work. I mean, maybe I'll just remix all the songs into like bangers for some reason and just play those.
Just chunk some drops in there, yeah.
Yeah, easy. Mate, give me 10 minutes, I'll do it.
I know, and literally, I swear, man, I've told you this before, you're one of the fastest workers in the studio I've ever seen, man. Were you always like that, or is that just something you kind of put in your 10,000 hours to be able to do?
I think I've always been like that. I think I get too bored too fast. And if I have something, I mean, back to the responsibility thing. If I have something in my brain, I just say in a self-destruct, very selfish kind of way, I'm just like, fuck it, I'm going to just run with this. And I just get it done. And then I'm like, okay, what's next?
Right.
And it obviously I'm not making music that's like at the level of like fucking like Jacob Collier or like fucking someone who puts countless hours into one song. But just to get that kind of thought out of my head, I definitely like to, execute it fast, because I've already been thinking about it all day. Yeah. And then when I sit down at a computer, I'm like, all right, boom, 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 boom. And it's done,
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, someone in the chat saying just make like a second version of the album for the shows. I was like, just all
dubstep edition.
Yeah, just all VIPs. Yeah.
Just get fucking Sullivan King to cover the whole thing.
Right. Just have him redo all the vocals on the album. Oh, man.
Hey man, I might need to drop man a text and see what he's up to.
That would be great. But yeah, usually I don't even go into like names and titles and stuff. But I thought the name of the album was 01953, and that's the zip code of where you grew up.
Is that right? Telephone area code.
Oh, telephone area code. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because you guys got the long telephone numbers over there.
Yeah. And the fucking the zip codes have letters in them.
Oh yeah, of course, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why there? Were you thinking about where you grew up a lot at the time? Like, obviously I see the UK sound connection, but were you also thinking about where you grew up at the time? Was that like in your head while you were writing?
Yeah, I think like, as you know, well, not personally, but because of me and stuff, just like the whole like immigration visa situation has been completely uproared because of, the pandemic. And I've essentially been stuck in America since 2019. And yeah, I think, I really just looked inward, and it was, along the same lines of why I wanted to make the songs was because of what I grew up on and how I was first exposed to any kind of music throughout my childhood and my teen years. And yeah, the name just kind of clicked. I mean, it's also great for SEO because no one else has a single or an album named 01953.
That's true.
But, also the meaningful version of it was just like, that's really where I connected. And I feel like being a bit homesick and being away from that kind of ecosystem, and that area really just made me appreciate and look back on what I was brought up on. So I think it all ties together pretty nicely throughout the sound, the name of the album, and I was going to name it like a few other things, but it was just like, it just didn't feel like authentic, and it didn't, as cheesy as it sounds, like I've never been like good at naming things. It's
Sure.
always just been like a bit of a hit and miss with naming things, especially with like a heavier stuff. But this is like the first thing that I've like put my name on where I'm like, yeah, this works flawlessly.
Well,
and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, I know. That's actually perfect, man, because I think it's really, this is maybe going deeper than maybe you originally intended. But if you think about that idea of, you being stuck here in America away from home, and then I think there's kind of like a melancholy feeling that runs through a lot of the tracks on the album. And I think I don't know, like that to me, that kind of context, I think that increases my understanding of the songs that are on the album, which, by the way, for the people in the chat, the album's not out quite yet, but by the time everybody listening to this as a podcast hears it, it will be out, which is a crazy thing. Like, because you were saying you've been doing, a bunch of interviews and press and other stuff leading up to it. Is this the biggest kind of, quote unquote promo campaign you've done for anything you've ever put out?
Yeah. And that's really fucking weird. Yeah. And, obviously, this is probably the most relaxed thing that I've done in the whole campaign, because
I hope so.
Willy Joy the man. But yeah, it's so weird. And going back to the melancholy thing, I think it's just like, I'm so thankful and blessed and appreciative of being where I am, being able to live in America and work in America, and, met my, incredible fiance and here, and got dogs here, and I'm just very thankful for my life. And I didn't want to lose sight of where I came from. And I think that's kind of like the ebb and flow of the feeling throughout the album, is the fact of like, I'm so happy and lucky to be here, but I miss the UK. I can't go back to the UK. I'm stuck here.
Yeah.
I'm feeling resentment towards, the US for some God known reason, because I'm stuck here in a way. It's such a weird feeling that not many people get to, understand. And I think with that in mind, I was like, I've got to just make a project out of this and just capture it. Because in, 10, 15, 20 years, when I, have citizenship or whatever, or have kids and we live between here and the UK, it's gonna feel effortless. But just to capture this moment in time, I think was really, really special and really like important to me to be able to do.
That makes perfect sense, man. It's funny because I think you had the flip situation of a lot of other people we know who kind of got trapped in whatever their home countries were, Like I'm sure Eptic was the first like quarantine guest I had on this show when we started doing it with Zoom. And at that time, he had been back in Belgium for a couple weeks, and he was like, yeah, I don't know, I might have to stay here for like another month. It's crazy. And then, he ended up he was stuck there for a year and a half. And
fucking Michael.
It's crazy, man. I mean, and some people still are. Like, I just saw Anna Luna was posted, like they just locked down again in Sydney, and she's been there the whole time. It's wild, man. I mean, this is maybe a weird question to ask, but do you feel like a camaraderie between artists from other countries who have all kind of collected here because this is where the industry is?
Yeah, we have a WhatsApp group.
Oh, shit.
I'm just like, yeah, we all get like very mixed advice from all of our respective visa lawyers,
right?
And we all just put it in the group, and we're like, all right, what's your person saying? What's your person saying? And like, it's kind of a bad thing, because it's like, I have definitely pissed off my immigration lawyer by being like, so and so said this. Why can't I do that? Like, because when someone tells me something, I'm like, I just want to fucking do it. And I got a message saying like my type of visa was eligible for emergency embassy appointments, which is the only thing that they're doing in the UK right now.
Right.
They're not doing like routine consular services. So I obviously went to man's lawyer and was like, why the fuck aren't I on a flight to the UK like right now? And then she's telling me something different because every single immigration lawyer is, risk averse in different ways and blah, 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 blah. So yeah, it's a good thing and a bad thing. I think, having the joint sentiment of like a lot of people who are stuck here or stuck outside, we can sympathize with one another, but at the same time, it's just a mess of information and we're all pissing off everyone.
Oh man. Yeah. I could totally see that just turning into just an angry group chat.
I have a meeting tomorrow and I'm looking forward to it because I'm going to just be so confused.
Oh man. Well, because we don't have to go too far down this road, but like the visa situation for everybody, it's so complex and it changes all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like depending on who's in power, depending on like what, like it could be year to year, a law gets passed and everything you were working on is kind of invalidated by some new procedure, right?
Yeah, it's also heavily based on where you're from as well. I mean, the US embassy, to give clarification to people who may not have ever heard about it before, in order to get a working visa for America to live and work in America, obviously you have to go through a rigorous process of application. But once you've got it, it can be anywhere between 1 and 3 years. And after that time has expired, and when that visa is expired, you have to visit a US embassy outside of the US to renew it. And a lot of what people are going through right now is they can't renew it because they either can't travel out of the country because of travel restrictions, or the embassy in their home country is closed.
Right.
And what a lot of the people from the UK are experiencing is the UK embassy or the US embassy in the UK is so backdated because of all the Europeans as well. They've just decided to say, fuck it, we're not doing any routine visa appointments and it's emergency only. And so, yeah, it's just like everything changes. But like there's been people from, like Michael Eptic from Belgium who have been able to go to the US embassy in Belgium. And there's people from Australia who have been able to go, like JP Blank and Laura, like Sippy. All those people have been able to get their visas fine. But it just is so temperamental and dependent on where that embassy is in your home country. And yeah, it's just honestly, like, and no disrespect to anyone who, works in immigration, but it's just a fucking mess. And no one could have anticipated it to get this bad. We were all told like, oh, it's only going to be a couple of months. And, regardless of the pandemic, with purely embassy appointments, but a year and a half later, it's still fucked. So
yeah, that's a lot, man. It's really a lot. And again, hearing all of this, and tell me if I'm reading too much into it, but I feel like it really does give me context for the new album. Like, because again, there's some of that, like, melancholy and there's emotion in it, but I don't know. It's like, there's some of that anger too, I feel like.
Yeah, I think, through everything, through worldwide media, and I'm not like some crazy conspiracy theorist, but just to preface it, but through everything, regardless of gender, race, sexual orientation, political belief, everything, there's just so much information that a single person has to digest. And then when that information is important to your own well-being and your own situation, it just becomes a lot to deal with, regardless of what it's about. And that's where I felt a lot of frustration was the travel stuff and things like that. As did thousands of others. I'm not downplaying anyone else's situation, but to lead that into the album, that's where a lot of that kind of angst came from, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let me ask you this, because this is something I always wonder about. So when you're frustrated, when you're angry with that kind of thing, is writing music for you a way to kind of work through that? Can you channel that into music? Or is writing music for you a way to kind of just block it out for a while? Or is it both?
I think it's both. And I think music is, it shouldn't be, because it's quite an unhealthy way to view it. But music is kind of like therapy to me, whether I'm like listening to it or making it. And I don't know the prolonged effects of all of the emotions that I've been through in the last year and a half, how that's going to affect me in years to come. I mean, like we said earlier, the future doesn't even fucking exist. But saying that, yeah, I don't actually know if it's my way of dealing with it or my way of ignoring it. I think that's it's a good question, but it's making me think. Like, I've never really like thought about that too much.
Well, the reason I ask is because I think you and I have both heard plenty of artists say, you know, oh, I wrote this song or this album when I was going through this really hard period. And, you know, it was my way of dealing with it. And I exercised my demons by writing this song. And I don't know, maybe I'm just like an asshole, but for me, a lot of times I'm like, is that really what happened? Or did you just kind of write music because you're good at writing music while you were having a hard time? And then eventually you weren't having a hard time. Like for me, because I've never been able to write music and feel like writing music solved any kind of problem for me. Like I love, it feels great to do. And I love music kind of more than anything else in the world. But as far as like this idea of like using it to actually solve my problems, there's a part of my brain, maybe a big part, that thinks like that's not a real thing.
Cap. I think it helps to understand and digest the headspace that you're in when you go forward and making music. I don't think it's the be all and end all, like, you know, like you agree with.
Yeah.
I definitely think there's influence, and obviously, you know, I mean, it's the same with anything, you know, like writing. If you're pissed off, you're gonna write more aggressively, you know, or paint more aggressively. Sure. And it's the same kind of thing with music, with guitar as well. If I'm pissed off and I'm fucking playing guitar, believe me, I'm going to fucking drop D and I'm just fucking going mental, right?
Yeah, buddy.
But at the same time, I don't think that that's a solvent for those feelings, and I don't think that that's a way to like get over them. It's definitely a way to get them out of your system.
Well, maybe it's even a way, now that we're talking about it, maybe it's a way to kind of reflect it back to yourself. You know, like it's like, you know, if you're angry, and so because you're angry, you write an aggressive song, then maybe it hasn't solved the problem, but maybe you can listen back to that aggressive song and sort of understand, like process your emotions better. You know what I mean?
But then does that make it worse because you're viewing an embodiment of you being pissed off?
I mean, maybe it does. Maybe that's like up to the individual, but at least I don't know if you're like me. For me, sometimes like I'm not aware, like I'm not self-aware enough in the moment to be like, oh, I'm really angry right now, or like, oh, I'm really insecure right now, or whatever it is. And I only kind of realize it later.
Right.
And maybe I'm kind of just arguing against myself now, but I feel like maybe that reflection thing is a way to kind of lock into what you're actually feeling and going through. And maybe that eventually helps deal with, I don't know, man.
That's a good point, though. That's true. I definitely agree with you.
Well, man, I don't know how we got that far down the rabbit hole on that one. I mean, do you think, here's a question for you. So, you know, you made this album in quarantine, no shows going on, you're sitting at home. Is that a rough mode for you? Like, do you have to have something to do all the time?
Yes and no. I think at the start, because I don't know if you remember, but at the start there was like this collective thing of like, everyone's streaming, everyone's doing, you know, lessons to supplement their income or whatever. Everyone's tweeting like, oh, I'm going to make one song every day for the next month. And it was just like, stop the cap. Like everyone knew that was like a facade in a way. So I think I never really delved into that. I kind of just kept at the same pace that I'd always gone at, because I knew for a fact that, you know, what comes up must come down. And if I ramped up my workflow and made a conscious effort to push through with like doing shit I wouldn't normally do, there'd be a time where I would be like, I'm over this. And it would just be like 2 months of silence.
Right.
I think rather what happened was my schedule obviously freed up. So I was able just to do what I would normally do, just a bit more focused. And I think what really changed was my focus on doing things rather than the way I did things. And that's kind of where it came from. I didn't sit down. I mean, I tweeted like, yo, I'm going to make an album, blah, blah, blah. And I definitely sat down and it was like, I should probably do that because like, I've got nothing else going on. But at the same time, like when it came to it and realistically, I didn't wake up and be like, I need to get X amount done today. And I need to do this at this time and this time. I just kind of just did it how I would normally do it. And I think that's why there was never really a period of me sitting around twiddling my thumbs. Like,
yeah,
fuck, what am I doing? You know?
Right. Well, yeah, because I mean, again, you've heard me say this to you a bunch of times, but I really do think of you as somebody who's just always working on music. Like you just kind of, in my mind, you open Ableton just like if you're not doing anything else. Like that's kind of the default.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
I mean, why do you think that is? Like, are you just a workaholic? Is opening up Ableton kind of just like, is it like playing a game? Is it just like a fun use of your time? What is that?
I think I'm a workaholic by fear. And I think, and this is going to get deep again, you know, we always get deep on these things, which is the best. I think it's the fear of not being good enough or not succeeding in something that I've essentially put every hour of my life into.
Yeah.
And that is so unhealthy. And I completely understand that, you know, and I'm like I said, I've been trying to like kind of figure out where the balance is with life and things like that itself. But this is all I've known. And having a computer in front of me and headphones or, you know, luckily where I'm at now, I'm able to have like a dedicated studio. But even before, it was like, I'd always just have a laptop and headphones because I was just scared of failure. And you hear so many people who are, you know, unfortunately and heartbreakingly had to give up music to, you know, survive and to work another job. And that has never been an option for me. I've always just pushed through, whether it be with my own project or working with other people on their projects or the, you know, the other things. But yeah, it really just comes down to fear. And I feel like this is like a life-changing moment and this is me. And I feel like I'm a step ahead every time. And in my mind, in some fucked up way, if I stop, that moment is going to catch me.
Right.
And that's why I'm just like 24/7, just my brain is always on. I'm like always just, and it's deteriorated my mental health in all honesty. But yes, it's all I know. It's all I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I relate strongly to what you're saying, man, because it's been the same for me too. There's, you know, obviously like you're a smart guy. I'm a smart guy, smart enough. And we could go do something else, right? Like we're not incapable of doing something else, but there is something in it. It's been the same for me, man. I've always figured out a way, you know, whenever the low moments hit or whenever the dips in the industry come, you know, you kind of do have to be, I don't know if I think of it as being a step ahead, but you always have to be doing something. And for me, you know, the second you see that wave cresting or whatever metaphor, I don't even know what I'm talking about, but whenever you see it on the horizon that like, oh, this is going to be a problem spot for me, my first reaction is like, all right, let's go to work, you know, like, there's kind of no other option.
It's like fight or flight.
Yeah.
You just got to fucking fight it every time. You can't run away from it. I think, that's, and you know, I think if you asked a few other people that same question, I think that would be the same sentiment, is that it's just it's just like the complete just basic way. It's just like, you've just got to do it. Like if you want to, and I try and tell this to people who are like, sometimes like message me like, yo, I want to do like music full time, but I don't know where to start and stuff. And I don't normally like pay notice to that. But like a few times I've been like, you just gotta fucking do it. And it's gonna fucking suck. Like,
right.
you're gonna, you might have to go on unemployment. You might have to like move back in with your parents. You might have to just fucking live in front of a computer for 24/7. But if you really want to make it happen, life is so short. And as we've seen like recently, like life is so temperamental that it's just like, you got nothing matters, bro. Like,
yeah,
nothing is for sure. And yeah, I that's kind of where I've kind of gone lately mentally, is it's like, fuck it. Like yeah, who cares, bro? Like,
right. World's
like,
burning, bro.
like who fucking, like, who actually cares? Like, within 100 years, every single person you've ever interacted with is going to be dead. Nothing's going to exist anymore. A new generation is going to come and do things the way that they're going to do things. If there's any time to just say fuck it and just do it, it's like right now.
Yeah, exactly, man. I love that we keep coming back to this idea of living in the moment and figuring out how we can put ourselves like more in the moment. Because what you're talking about, everyone you're going to be gone. Everyone is going to be gone. And I'll take that one step further to talk about the idea of legacy, right? Because I think you and I both know so many artists who are concerned with like, oh, I have to leave this legacy. I have to change things. People will remember my work. And I think about that idea and I'm like, well, they're not going to remember your work 200 years from now. Like they're not going to remember anyone's work. Like, how many people from 200 years ago do we talk about their music? It's like I could count them on one hand,
Literally, yeah.
So for me, even that idea is kind of false at the end of the day. And it's really more about, no, man, are you enjoying what you're doing right now? Are you with people you value? Do you feel like you're contributing something and, making yourself feel good while making the people around you feel good, whether it's with your art or music or whether it's just being a good person? Like, what else is there at the end of the day?
Yeah, legacy is a weird one because everyone has this like pretense in their head of like, I want to be remembered after I die, and I think that's a cool goal to work towards. But realistically, yeah, like you said, it's all about, I mean, yeah, you already said it. It's all about who you're around and what you're doing and stuff like right now. I think it's a cool thing to work towards, and definitely something that, it's good to have in your mind, because if that drives you to do better things, then yeah, chase the legacy. But realistically, it's like with anything, it might just be a bit of a lie to tell yourself to just keep going.
What was driving you when you started getting into this? Like, can you think back to when you first really started, Tisoki as a project, and you were making your first few Tisoki tunes? Like, what kind of goals were you thinking about? Was it whether it was legacy or whether it was wanting a career like somebody else, or whether it was just the love of the music? Like, what was driving you back then?
Dropping out of high school and not really having anything else in mind that I wanted to do. A lot of people, they say like, oh, when I graduate from college or university, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer, blah, blah, blah. I didn't even go to fucking college or university. I just knew that music was like, it's so weird, man. Thinking back as an adult on like the very naive and almost dangerous situation that I put myself into. I was just like, I just knew music, and I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And it may have just been very, egotistical and also naive again at the same time. I just kind of just said to myself, I was like, this is all I'm going to do. And yeah, again, like it sucked for like the first few years, and I grinded through it, and I think that just put more of a fire up my ass to actually just succeed with it. There was never any like, I never wanted to be like anyone else. Obviously I looked at other people and saw what they were doing, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's just, I didn't really have a choice. It was just, I didn't like I remember being in high school, and like the people who, just before I left, the people who helped you choose which like college course you wanted to go into and do was talking to me, and they were just like dumbfounded, because I didn't want to do anything. I didn't have any interest in anything else. So yeah, I think it was just, I don't know. I'm not going to say I was put on this earth to make music, because that's just so fucking stupid, because I wasn't. I was put on this earth because my parents had sex. But I think, I don't know, man. I think it was just the only thing that I had kind of going for me, and I just ran with it. And that was kind of it.
Well, yeah, because, and we covered this, I think, on probably the very first time you were on this podcast, which, by the way, for anybody in the chat right now, anybody listening back to this later, you got to go check out the other two amazing Tisoki episodes that have already happened on this podcast if you want the whole superhero backstory. But no, because you were playing in like metal bands even before that, right? Like music was always a thing for you.
Yeah, I mean, I went to like performing arts school, so it was like music and painting and drawing and acting, drama, as we called it back then.
I think they still call it that.
I said this to someone else the other day. It's fucking weird how you study drama at school, because now when you hear drama, you think of like two fucking dickheads on Twitter just going at each other. So it's just... But yeah,
that's so true. Were you? It's funny, man, because I didn't go to like a performing arts high school, but I was very much doing the same thing. I was, trying acting, I was trying music, all that kind of stuff. And when I did go to university, and when I first went there, I thought like acting was going to be what I was going for, until I got there and saw like what real actors were and how serious they were about the craft, and kind of realized that like, oh, I don't love it like these people love it. Like this takes a different level of dedication. And then for me, like you said, I was like, oh, well, the only choice is music at this point, because that's the only thing I feel this strongly about, the only thing that I can sort of just fall off the map doing,
Yeah. What's funny is just, I never really liked actors. Now that I'm reflecting on that time, because hey, here's the thing, right? Here's a weird little parallel, right?
Yeah.
When we go to a live show, or we listen to like a DJ mix on the radio or something done by like fucking DJ Zinc, fucking Amiga 3, whatever his name is on the radio, right? Who isn't like a professional DJ, right? You criticize it, right? And you're like, oh, that transition was shit, or that snare drum was too loud, or whatever. The thing about actors, and hey, I'm not shitting on all actors, so I'm sorry if this applies to you, but as a professional, you criticize your craft. Actors' job is to be someone else.
Yeah.
So who the fuck are you really? I don't know. That just came into my head. I had to say it. I was like, what?
Oh, 100%, man. I'm just a podcast nerd. So I listen to, comedians and actors on podcasts all the time. And I think that's absolutely a thing. Like people can kind of get lost in the characters they play, like the ones who go super deep in it, that kind of thing. It's their whole life. Yeah, I think you can absolutely lose who you are in it. And I think as the public, and I'll tie this back into music, like, because it's the same way people who sort of like put famous DJs on a pedestal, you get this idea of who somebody is based off of their work that might not have anything to do with who they are as a person,
Hey, fucking 2020 exposed all that shit.
Yeah,
we all know
exactly.
That.
I was about to say we're seeing plenty of that, which the more the better for me. Like bring on all of that shit. Like, but it's funny. Yeah, I mean, I think actors have that even worse, right? Because we think about whoever it is, Brad Pitt or George Clooney. Like we're not thinking about who they are as a person. We're thinking about whatever our favorite movie of theirs is.
Yeah.
It's like
the creative industry is definitely a weird space to be in, and I think that's why I really just try and stay authentic. And I don't want to make like some artist project that isn't. I mean, hey, don't get me wrong. Put me on salary, and I'll work on an artist project. That's someone's like facilitated vision. But for me personally, I think that's kind of just why I'm like all over the place. Is like, I don't want to be some like manufactured fucking, ripped steroid inducing fake tanned like superstar. I'm just like a dweeby kid who just fucking just makes music. And I think that's where I want to be. And that's what gives me solace and helps me sleep at night, because I know that I'm doing the best for me in my situation.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's such a great realization to have. I mean, okay, so I usually do this a little later, but somebody in the chat just asked a question I think is really good and kind of relates to what we were just talking about. Kid Brian wants to know, any advice for artists who are worried about the future of the world and the country? It can be hard to imagine building a music career when the world is so crazy right now. Which that's, first of all, Kid Brian, I love that you're willing to go as deep as we're going right now. But I think that's a good question, man. I think that's, I kind of want to flip that question a little bit to more be like, can we as people working in dance music, which like, especially bass music, that kind of thing, like there's not always a ton of depth and a ton of meaning and like deep ideas in bass music, right? But is there a way we can, can you have a message? Can you party with a message? Can you be involved and do what you want to do and have fun and still feel like you're contributing something? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
It's kind of like a two-part. I'd say for like to build a career, situationally is already hard, given the pandemic and things like that. But I think you've just got to look towards the sun in the sense of like, we have the internet, and there's kids in, I mean, I don't know where you're from, or your situation, but there's kids in like war-stricken countries who are getting like bombed. Just like the worst fucking shit is happening to these people, and they're still able to make a success of music because of the internet. So I think rather than walking outside and looking how you can make a career where you are, I would just say focus online. Because a lot of people have access to the internet, and a lot more people have access to the internet than probably do in your immediate area. Obviously, with situational, there's more opportunities. Like if you're in LA and it's like, oh, you want to come do like a writing session or whatever, and you can be there in 30 minutes. That's very different. But for starting something and to really grow something from the ground up, I definitely think utilizing the internet is so important these days, because that's ultimately where music is. No one really sells CDs anymore.
Yeah.
The physical side of it is pretty much abolished, unfortunately. And it's all on streaming. So I think regardless of where you are, I wouldn't let that play on your mind too much, in the sense of starting a career. I would just fucking run it online.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that too, that, if you are worried about sort of the dark times in the world right now, I think rather than worrying about whether your music is affecting that or don't get too in your head about it. Because really, at the end of the day, like all we can do, and I think this is something you and I were talking about a second ago, Brad, is like all we can do is be a good example. Like I think the best way you can, if you want to do music and you want to be in this community, then be a good member of this community. And, because we have plenty of bad, shitty people in this community already. So, if you want to make a change, I think that's the best way to start doing it, is like do the work, get good, put in your hours. And then once you get in here on any level, whether it's the tiniest level or the biggest level, you gotta take care of the people around you. You gotta comport yourself well. And, don't worry about the world, like worry about your little sphere. And if you can make your little sphere better, then, if enough people do that, that's how the world gets better,
100%. Yeah. You just got to let it inspire you in a way. And it's never to like devalue someone's situation, but you've always just got to have in your mind as well, like it could always just be worse. And a lot of people would find like that as an excuse to like, not do anything. And it's like, oh, well, there's a pandemic, or like, like I'm working so and so job and blah, blah, blah. But like, like I said before, man, if you really want to make it work, you'll make it work regardless of anything that's happening outside of yourself.
Yeah. It's again, we started off this conversation talking about this, like being the creative career path. It's such a weird, you have to find the weirdest balance of being totally selfish and totally selfless at the same time. It's like, it's this impossible balance that we're always trying to strike. But I think, the closer you can get to it, the better you're going to be for it. What are you listening to right now, man? What's exciting to you? What's catching your ear right now? Whether it's in bass music or anything else, like, is there anything recently kind of rearranged your brain as far as music goes?
Yeah, I will. And this might be like almost like a self-endorsement. It's not, but that my best friend from back home, he used to make like dance music, went by the name What Good. And yeah, man, he's just done a whole 180. And I think just really embraced who he is. Started a new project. It's called Pocket, like POC.
Oh yeah.
K-E-T. And it's had that project in the few months since he's launched it has had more success than What Good ever did. So yeah, that he really inspires me, and he actually did some work on the album with me as well. He's listed on there.
Oh yeah.
As like a credit, well, not a credit, but he's on like the back end stuff. But yeah, so his stuff was really inspiring to me, and just seeing how he, regardless of fan base size or whatever, I mean, by any means, he wasn't like headlining EDC or was like a massive artist, but just from where he came from and was able to switch it up and do him authentically, I think is really inspiring. Also happens that he's my best friend.
Well, that helps. But I mean, what you just said, I want to say it again for anybody listening, because I think there's something in that. You said in a couple months, the project saw more success than he had seen in the past several years, just by virtue of taking that leap, leaving behind the baggage, starting a new name, new style, whatever you want to say. And I think that's so admirable too, because I think so many people get so married to like either the history of the songs you put out, or you get your identity so wrapped up in whatever you're doing right now. It can be really hard to step away from it and jump off the cliff again, And so I think there's something really admirable in that. And then to hear you say that, it now he's seeing more success than ever. That's great, man. I think more people need to understand that lesson.
Yeah, I think for starting a project as well, I mean, obviously he had some notability beforehand with this previous project. We'd done a couple of records together and stuff, but like, you and I, for example, are at a point where we can essentially, we're very blessed and lucky to be in a position where we can essentially do whatever the fuck we want, because, we can text or message like any of the fucking big DJs. We're already on good terms to like get stuff played out or whatever. Like, it's not really like for us going forward. And I use us in like a sense of you and I respectively. It's not like a showing face kind of thing. People already know of our names. People already know of like what we've done, where we've been. And that's kind of the cool moment of where we're at. For Louis Pocket, what has been really cool for me, at least as like a good friend to see, is beforehand he kind of melted into like the bass music scene. So there wasn't really much like I'm not saying that his music was cookie cutter, but like he definitely tried to fit in a certain lane, and it got success. Like, don't get me wrong, there's a few songs that have done well. But bro, within 3 months, he's already like texting like fucking like What So Not. And like Porter Robinson's manager really loves his music, and he's like, all of that has just because he took the initiative to step out of the box and just do it in his own way. And I think for starting a project, that's a really admirable way to go, of just being authentic from the offset.
Yeah.
Because all the other people around you will see that, they'll see that you're being genuine and that you're not trying to just make a fucking dubstep banger to fit in with a certain crowd. Because that shit is the most off-putting thing ever, when you can just see like this branded person who has got branding down to a T. None of it's authentic. The whole Instagram is flawless, and the music is just splice loops and shit like this. Like,
yeah,
it just disappears into a sea of thousands of other people trying to do that. And the reason why Louis, in my opinion, and other people's opinion as well, stands out is because he just said, fuck it. He's just the same thing that I was saying earlier. He just did his own music. He does his own art as well. And he's getting really good, solid recognition for that.
Yeah, there's something about, because I think when you're starting off, right, you kind of, we all start off trying to make stuff that sounds like the stuff we like. But then some people just never get beyond that,
Yeah.
And it's because there's that fear, right, of like, oh, well, who would, as a DJ at least, it's like, oh, who would play this? Or like, what audience does this appeal to? And I get that fear. Like we've all had those thoughts.
Yeah.
But then you're absolutely right. The second you can step away from it and just be like, actually, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Like I'll play it at my shows, that I will have, because I'm making music I like. It's that kind of that confidence and self-belief. I don't know. This is maybe a little woo-woo, but I feel like people can actually feel that in the music. The same way 100%. You were saying that people can feel when somebody's just making cookie cutter stuff.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's woo-woo. I think it's completely bang on, because you can, like, as a general listener, as like a consumer of music who has no idea about music production or anything that goes on in the industry side of it, you can just fucking tell. You can tell when you listen to the radio. Like you already know, like, the song that's on the radio has 20 writers on it. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Right.
But then you hear something. There was a record called Hotel Zaza by an artist called Hammond. And I heard it and I was like, on the radio, I was like, holy fuck, like this is insane. And sure enough, I go on Spotify, show credits, it's just him. And you can just tell, like, self-released as well, you can just tell, like, yeah, there's definitely a discerning factor where you can just understand it from a listener's perspective as well.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. In Kid Brian in the chat, coming with the banger questions, was asking, any advice for artists trying to find themselves musically, and saying that it can be, overwhelming and confusing, especially at the start, to even know if you're carving out your own sound or not, and whether, these things you're trying out are good ideas or bad ideas. And I think that's a great piece of advice, putting yourself in the position of a listener and being like, is this something I would listen to? Like, try to remove yourself out of it.
Yeah. Nothing happens. As much as managers and agents and PR companies want you to believe, nothing happens like fast in the music industry. It's just where Kid Brian is right now. It's just the fucking sucky part of it. And I wish I could sit here and tell you, like, it's all going to be rainbows and unicorns, but it's just going to be like dog shit and concrete. Like, with all due respect, it's just going to fucking suck for a bit, but that's the beautiful part of it, is because if you grind through that and make it through that, you're meant to do it. And that once that happens, people will start being like, oh, okay, he's been at this long enough, or, did this enough times where he's confident in himself. And then that's when more people will start listening to it.
Absolutely.
It just takes time.
Yeah. And I mean, it's true for anything in life, man. You gotta make mistakes the first time around. You gotta go through the hard times. That's the only way. You could have somebody tell you shit like we're telling you shit right now for a million times, but until you actually go through it and learn those lessons, you won't understand it in that same way,
100%.
Yeah. I'm going to ask a modified version of this question. Somebody asked, what are your favorite types of tracks to make? Which let me bounce off of that, because I want to ask you, on the album, which has a lot of these, two-step garage sounds we've been talking about, how is producing a song like that different for you than producing, say a heavy dubstep song or any other kind of song? Like, is the production process, the songwriting process different for you? Do you focus on different things?
Yeah, I think for the heavier stuff, obviously it's a lot more leaning towards like sound design more heavily. And over the years, I've just gotten so used to just doing sound design that it's like second nature to me, or like even just like finding samples. So yeah, it's definitely different as opposed to like the garage stuff where it's more about the chords or the vocals or the overall feel of the track. And the heavier stuff is just like, it just bangs. And that's it. Again, so many people want to put up a facade of like, this meant so much to me, blah, 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 like, and to have some like false narrative with just a fucking dubstep song. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we all know that it's just dance music. Yeah. And that's not to say that, I mean, people might execute me for saying that, but it's not to say that dance music doesn't have feeling or emotion behind it. But when it's like headbanger dubstep, you're definitely telling yourself a lie if you're coming from a place other than thinking this is going to sound sick live. Which is, again, there's nothing wrong with feeling like that and having those thoughts about music, because ultimately at the end of the day, if that's what you want to do, then do it. Yeah. But in terms of the writing process, I can guarantee you every single person who writes heavy music, or dubstep at least, modern day dubstep, whatever you want to call it, bro step, anything, definitely thinks of that like first and foremost.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, how about for working with vocalists for you? What's your process, when you're bringing somebody in? Like we were talking about, there's real emotion in this album, and a lot of these songs are, about either heavy topics or just emotionally charged subjects. I think that's something a lot of people don't understand. Maybe young producers don't really know. Like, how do you work with vocalists? How do you kind of get to like that kind of intimate place with somebody where maybe you don't know them that well at the start?
I can write lyrics, I can sing if I need to. But getting older, the thing that really attracts me to working with certain vocalists is how they feel. And, the lyrics that they write and how they portray a story. And, there's been a few times where I've gotten vocals back and I'm like, I just don't resonate with it. Someone's talking about like being on a beach or like, stuff like that. And I just don't, it's not me. So
You've never been on a beach.
Hey, I went to the dog beach.
Oh, there you go.
But for me, at least in the way that I work with vocalists, is I like to hear their story. And if I personally can resonate with it, that's when I'll go forward with working with the vocalist. It's a bit of a weird like way of doing things. I'll never sit down in a room with a vocalist and be like, yeah, let's write about this. Let's write about that. When I have a vocalist feature on my song, and this is maybe why I'm like super selective with who I have as like a title feature on my song, is I want to fully understand the concept that they have written and had come to their mind after listening to the instrumental or to my music. And then if that clicks, then boom, it's a done deal.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't work out, it just doesn't happen. And I just don't allow it to happen past that point, and it just gets shelved.
How do you find those people? Is it usually you reaching out to a vocalist?
Yeah, or we get pitched like people from like other management teams and stuff sometimes, or it's maybe word of mouth, like through a friend, or it's mostly word of mouth, and someone will know someone, or that kind of thing. So that's kind of where I find where I connect the dots. But yeah, I think it's just, it ultimately just boils down to just what their vision is after interpreting the instrumental in their own way.
Right. And leaving space
that's the
for
bottom
it,
line.
right? Yeah. And like leaving space for their interpretations, not trying to just make them do exactly what's in your head.
Yeah. I mean, hey, whether it's on the title, it's a feature or it's listed as a collaboration, however, the machine of the music industry wants to title it, regardless, you're collaborating with someone on a song.
Yeah.
Whether they have 10% input, 50% input, 90% input, whatever, you have to put your own ego down and be open to their thoughts and their feelings and their vision based off of what they have heard you do.
Completely agreed, man. Well, I'm really excited for this album to come out. I've heard it already. I love it. I texted you that, but yeah, man, I'm stoked. How are you feeling about it coming out? This is, I mean, debut album, right?
I'm nervous, and I've never been nervous before. I don't know. I'm excited. It's been a long time coming. I mean, like 8 months working on the songs, and then another 8, 9, 10 months working on the planning of like rollout and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just, I feel like I've been in labor and I'm just like ready to fucking give birth,
Right.
and let it run its course and, have a flourishing childhood and grow up and sit on like streaming services and just live in its own world. And, people can go back to it. People can listen to it once and hate it. People can, listen to it every day for all I care. I'm just happy to be able to be in a fortunate enough position to be able to put something out into the world that's like that.
That's beautiful, man. Let your baby go off into the world. I think that's kind of the best attitude you can have about it. It's cool you're working with Monstercat too. I can't remember if we talked about this last time, but I feel like it makes sense to me. You and Monstercat. It's like, that's a good pairing.
Yeah, and they've really we've all been talking, myself, my team, Monstercat team, and everyone, and they're really elevating the label to like their next, because they've been known for just like dance music and like music for games and things like that, which absolutely nothing wrong with it. I think it's sick, and they definitely carved themselves as the pioneer in that lane.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're taking a more like progressed, mature route lately, or route as you guys say. And even like the releases that like Vendetta have done on the label,
those are
like,
incredible. Yeah,
it's just so good. And they, Monstercat as a whole thing have such a incredible group of people working for them and such a reach within their connections and things like that. So yeah, I'm very honored and very glad that they really understood the vision and like we're able to facilitate it, and we were able to like collaboratively work on a lot of things. So yeah, I'm super amped.
No, yeah. Shout out to Monstercat, man. They have such a great team over there. There's a lot of people over there that I like a whole lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good to actually, like, I know we text now and then, but it's good to catch up, man. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for coming back on.
Always. I mean, I'm around, man. Just,
you and me both.
Want me back on for a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. Just, drop me a line.
Dude, we got to do it, man. We got to do it. Well, is there anything else? I mean, we went all over the map on this one. Anything else that's on your mind? Anything else you want to get out there before we wrap this up?
I think that's it. Just don't think that I'm changing my whole career to be a different person. I'm still going to be making bangers. Still going to be, releasing all kinds of music. So that's kind of all I have to say is just enjoy the album for what it is. Listen to it in its full. Let it flow. And then yeah, regular scheduled programming of shows and bangers will be back soon.
Oh yeah, baby. Never stopping. But for real, I mean,
no, sir.
The album's phenomenal, man. You did really good work. And I hope people listen to it for a long time and process it, because there's really a lot going on there.
I appreciate that a lot, man. Thank you.
Absolutely, buddy. I love you, man. It's good to see you.
Likewise, brother. Thank you for your time. And yeah, we'll chat soon.
Yeah, man. Hope to see you in person soon. Take care, dude.
Au revoir. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, Mr. Guetta.
Goodbye.